The Daily Bible in chronological order. Paul's arrest and trial. The prophecy of Agabus is soon to be fulfilled. Upon his return to Jerusalem, Paul now finds himself being arrested and attacked by local Jews who have been stirred up by certain men from Asia. Fortunately, however, Paul will be rescued by Roman soldiers acting under Claudius Lysias, the local Roman commander. The historical record sets forth Paul's attempt to defend himself before a mob which is demanding his death, and indicates a fair reception to his discourse until he mentions being God's messenger to the Gentiles. Angry crowd reaction to that assertion forces Claudius Lysias to take Paul into protective custody. On the following day, the record reveals that Paul is put on trial before the Sanhedrin Council, in much the same way that Jesus himself had been tried years earlier, by referring to his own heritage as a Pharisee and to his brief years earlier. And to his brief and to his belief in a resurrection after death. Paul adroitly sets the Pharisees in controversy against the Sadducees, who do not believe in a resurrection. In a debate which ensues, no charges are brought and Paul is returned to custody. When a plot to kill Paul is uncovered, Paul is secreted away by night to Caesarea, where he will later be brought before the governor Felix. Now, as Luke records Paul's arrival in Jerusalem before his arrest, an effort is made by James and the elders at Jerusalem to calm the anxiety of Jewish Christians who are uncertain about Paul's teaching. Plan for unity. Acts chapter 21, verses 17 through 26. In Jerusalem, on Pentecost, AD 58. When we arrived at Jerusalem, the brothers received us warmly. The next day, Paul and the rest of us went to see James, and all the elders were present. Paul greeted them and reported in detail what God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. When they heard this, they praised God. Then they said to Paul, "You see, brother, how many thousands of Jews have believed, and all of them are zealous for the law. They have been informed that you teach all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to turn away from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or live according to our customs. What shall we do? They will certainly hear that you have come, so do what we tell you. Therefore, men with us who have made a vow, take these men, join in their purification rites, and pay their expenses, so that they can have their heads shaved. Then everybody will know there is no truth in these reports about you, but that you yourselves are living in obedience to the law. As for the Gentile believers, we have written to them our decision that they should abstain from food sacrificed to idols, from blood, from the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual immorality." The next day Paul took the men and purified himself along with them. Then he went to the temple to give notice of the date when the days of purification would end, and the offering would be made for each of them. Jews seize Paul in temple. Acts chapter 21, verses 27 through 30. When the 7 days were nearly over, some Jews from the province of Asia saw Paul at the temple. They stirred up the whole crowd and seized him, shouting, "Men of Israel, help us! This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against our people and our law and this place. And besides, he has brought Greeks into the temple area and defiled this holy place." They had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, in the city with Paul, and assumed that Paul had brought him into the temple area. The whole city was aroused, and the people came running from all directions. Seizing Paul, they dragged him from the temple, and immediately the gates were shut. Paul arrested. Acts chapter 21, verses 31 through 36. While they were trying to kill him, news reached the commander of the Roman troops that the whole city of Jerusalem was in an uproar. He at once took some officers and soldiers and ran down to the crowd. When the rioters saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. The commander came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. Then he asked who he was and what he had done. Some in the crowds shouted one thing and some another. And since the commander could not get at the truth because of the uproar, he ordered that Paul be taken into the barracks. Then Paul reached the steps. The violence of the mob was so great he had to be carried by the soldiers. The crowd that followed kept shouting, "Away with him!" Paul asked to speak. Acts chapter 21, verses 37 through 39. As the soldiers were about to take Paul into the barracks, he asked the commander, "May I say something to you?" "Do you speak Greek?" he replied. "Aren't you the Egyptian who started a revolt and led 4,000 terrorists out into the desert some time ago?" Paul answered, "I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no ordinary city. Please let me speak to the people."